Hey, you're listening to the Sub Club Podcast, a show dedicated to the best practices for building and growing subscription app businesses. We'll share insider secrets from the top subscription apps on the app stores. Let's get into the show.
Our guest today is Ron Schneidermann, CEO at AllTrails, the ultimate guide for outdoor adventures. AllTrails was early to the consumer subscription space, launching a $3 a month premium tier way back in 2012. Ron joined as CMO and COO in 2015, and then took over as CEO in 2019, helping to grow AllTrails to over 1 million subscribers and tens of millions of active users worldwide. On the podcast, we talk with Ron about the magic of consumer subscriptions, experimenting with freemium strategies, and how private equity isn't always as bad as you've been led to believe. Hey, Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really looking forward to the chat today. I wanted to just kick it off. I mean, most people know what AllTrails is, and it's a fantastic brand in that it kind of tells you what it is right there on the tin. But what's your pitch? I mean, we're in 2021, post-pandemic. Give us the short version of what is AllTrails? What does it mean?
Yeah, so AllTrails is it's a free app and website that helps you find trails all over the globe so you can spend more time enjoying the outdoors and spending time in nature.
That's awesome.
That's a very nice mission. That's way more like beautiful than helping developers make more money. Both important. But I can smell that. Like it smells like piney, and I like it.
Yeah, it smells like the Colorado forest. I haven't been hiking forever, and doing all the research to chat with you today was like, oh man, I need to go hiking more.
I hear there's a great app for that.
I hear that. So I did want to also ask kind of about your journey to AllTrails. So you got there fairly early, and then grew in, and they're now CEO. But just tell me off the bat, what led you to AllTrails way back in 2015 when it was just 6 people?
Yeah. I guess to answer that, I'm going to go a little bit further back in time.
Yeah.
My first job right after college was at Accenture, at a global management consulting firm. And, it was great. Good jumping off point, learned a ton. I didn't know anything going into that job. And, you get the rubber stamp and it opens doors and stuff. But by the end of my, third year there, I kind of had the realization, I don't know, maybe epiphany is a little too strong of a word, but I just kind of realized like, I can't take a job just for money again. Like the amount of time and energy that I was putting into it and the lack of work-life balance, it really made me rethink who do I want to be? Who does working Ron want to be? And so I was able to parlay that Accenture job into a biz dev role over at Hotwire, an online travel company. And that was really where it opened my eyes. Like, oh my God, I am so much happier. And I am honestly so much better when I'm working at something that I'm just personally passionate about. And that guiding principle is really held throughout my career trajectory. From Hotwire, I went and did my own startup in the ski space. I love to ski. So I did that for 9 years. That was a ton of fun. And then I was over at Yelp doing growth for a bit. I love finding like non-chain restaurants and supporting mom and pop businesses and stuff. And I live in Yelp. So that was great. And then when the opportunity for AllTrails presented itself, it was just kind of a no-brainer. Like of course I'm going to take this, of course. And I'll say this too, one little addendum. One of the things I learned along the way too, is I am not a 0 to 1 guy. Like that is not when I am at my best. That just causes me stress and anxiety and just, figuring out like how to keep the lights on for another day. And so again, like knowing kind of that sense of self, knowing like, all right, like I'm best at B2C. I'm best using, I'm at my best when I'm using products I personally want to use and like talking about. And I like hypergrowth. And I think that's probably my sweet spot. So the stars kind of aligned when AllTrails showed up.
Yeah. And then how did that go from, you joined the company as CMO, right? And then what was the progression inside the company to eventually taking over as CEO?
Yeah. So I joined as CMO and COO. I don't know why I really wanted to have both. Like I didn't want to just be CMO in a vacuum, but not have any ownership or agency over kind of team composition and strategy and stuff. So I thought that it was really really important. And when you're a 6-person company, it's pretty easy to grab titles. It's not like I had to take it anymore.
I was going to ask, like, I mean, it's not like you see this a lot where it's like a 6-person company and they have like 5 C-levels and you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Like my title, for example. But like, I'm kind of curious, like, you like your background, you founded a company, like you were like a real CX, whatever, right? Like, it's not like it was fake. So how did you go as like an executive, like choosing your next thing to like that had to be a hell of a pitch to get you to like join a tiny little like team like that.
I think I spent a lot of time thinking through again, like, I don't know. I to be perfectly honest, I was a little bit bored at the end of my tenure at Yelp. I love Yelp. It's a great company, but it was too big for me. And so I spent a lot of time thinking through what's next. Again, that whole question, like 0 to 1, do I need to start something myself or what? So the smallness didn't bother me. I actually really liked the smallness because it's almost like a cheat code. Like I got to do a startup like basically from scratch, but I didn't have to do it from scratch. And then
they had a kernel of something at that
stage.
They
did. And it was actually to give my predecessor credit, it was actually more than that. Like they had solid product market fit from a monetization perspective. And then what really got me across the line was their product channel fit. And I feel like that's often overlooked. And that's something you kind of pick up in time. Like, it's not just like, is this a product people are willing to pay money for, but just straight up, how are you going to get this out to market? And can you do it in a way that is, viable and scalable and ultimately, going to be more efficient than, it's kind of like net out, right? Like the whole LTV CAC and everything there, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's something more efficient than paying for every single install, right?
Exactly. And so, it felt like there was good bones. Maybe it was like a fixer-upper kind of house, but it had good bones. Like it had the foundation in place. It had, and I could see, back in 2015, the product sucked. It did. It sucked. And what was shocking after I came was how bad the data was. I didn't realize that when I was kind of doing my own diligence. But it was all.
You mean like analytics on the internally, what the company knew about itself, or you mean like the trail data?
The trail data, like the trail data that we were showing, and that stuff's high consequence. And so that was like a hard pivot within a couple months. Like, all right, this is a all hands on deck thing. We're not doing anything else until we figure this out. But again, it felt like there was a diamond in the rough in this one,
mm-hmm.
and. I've been here 6 years now, and I can say like unequivocally, this is the highlight of my career. Maybe I just got lucky. I don't know, but man, like, yeah, this has been a really, really great run so far.
I was just going to ask about that channel and monetization fit. I mean, I guess this was, maybe I'm jumping ahead in our agenda here, but yeah, they were already charging a subscription before you got there, right? In terms of like monetization, and maybe like describe that model a little bit and how that has changed.
Yeah, I had never done a subscription business before coming here, so this was my first subscription business. And I mean, that you guys already know this. I'm sure your listeners already know this too. But subscription businesses are magical. Oh my goodness, compared to like. E-commerce where you're trying to re-win, the transaction every single time.
I know. I was looking at Hotwire just now when you mentioned it, and I was just thinking about like how many of those there were at that era, right? Like, and still are. Like when you go to book a hotel on Google, and they're like, "Oh, here's 15 different sites you can actually like book it through." It's like, woof.
Oh, it's so tough. Same with Liftopia.
Yeah,
Liftopia, the ski startup. It was the same thing, right? But with a much smaller niche and segment. and then Yelp is, they're kind of the media model, and then trying to, kind of pivot more towards like B2B and subscriptions for businesses and value added services and stuff. And coming here doing a consumer subscription business, an annual subscription that auto renews. It's like an annuity, like it just builds up every single year. Like obviously, like you can't take retention for granted, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but just if you're able to kind of, do a pretty good job on the retention side and just see this thing build up and just raise the tide every single year that I've been here and have it just, it's that much more momentum that just gets like brought into each new fiscal year for us. It's incredible. It is incredible the leverage that it offers. So that was cool. That was definitely
one of those good bones you're talking about, right? Like,
yeah. And that's what I was going to ask. So you say the bones were good. AllTrails had launched their subscription in 2012, so about 3 years before you joined. What was the state of that? And that's really early in the kind of consumer subscription software space.
Super early.
Was there a lot of pushback? How was traction, chargebacks, and things like that? The bones were there, but were there some serious doubts or questions in your mind as to how this subscription app space was going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, so can I share a secret with you guys? I honestly didn't know that our subscription business lost in 2012 until you guys showed me the research that you did leading up to this. I had always thought that it launched with our apps. We launched our apps in, I think, early 2015. I joined in September 2015. And I just lumped everything together just in that,
Yeah, it's prehistory.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I had always thought that we had launched it when our apps launched, but I guess we were on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of the subscription space here.
But then I'm correct to assume that if you launched a subscription in 2012, it was on the web. If you didn't have apps until 2015, right?
Yeah.
Which I mean, my experience, I guess I've been on AllTrails website, but like my vast majority of experience has been on the web, right? Because I'm like. Or sorry, on the phone, because I'm going for a hike and I'm like, I need a map, and like, boom, there's AllTrails, right? Which I guess is that channel fit you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's been one of the cool things when I started. So a couple I guess data points, just to show like sort of that snapshot in time of 2015. We probably had 20,000 subscribers at that point, maybe 1 million cumulative registered users since 2010 when we first launched, and maybe 20,000 active paying subs. And in January of this year, we put out a press release. We don't normally do that, but it was 2 pretty cool milestones. We had cracked 25 million registered users and 1 million paying subs at the start of this year. So, again, like the unlock has been really cool and very, very powerful. But the other thing, like you said, like this was, a web-driven subscription business at first. When I first started here, probably 70% of our web traffic was desktop to mobile, 70-30. And obviously that's inverted since then. And then the mobile apps, the native apps are by far the best form factor for what we're trying to do. Like you said, Jacob, like take it with you on the go, the navigation, the GPS stuff, everything baked in there. And so that's become really the workhorses of subscription business and of our overall UGC flywheel as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so helpful. You guys have good SEO. When you search a trail, it comes up on AllTrails, right? But I would imagine like this stage probably mostly like demand gen for the app.
That's exactly
right?
it. No, that's exactly it, right? So our legacy SEO, this is again one of the beauties of being around for 11 years and counting. We have this amazing legacy SEO, and that was that product channel fit that brought me here. Was the sales pitch was he just showed me Google Analytics. And he just like look at all of this free traffic.
Just like hyper local, very valuable data, right?
High
intent.
intent.
And if you're the winner, that's a great real estate to have.
I know. Right? And so what we've been doing, obviously, as sort of consumer behavior has changed and gone mobile first, is we're able to parlay all of that mobile first SEO traffic into incremental organic app installs. And that's a huge driver of our business. We get millions and millions of incremental app installs that we don't pay a dime for every month.
Yeah. And going back to your point, like, not having to push the ball up the hill completely is a bit, you think about a compounding annuity analogy as you made, right? Like the cost of that compounding really, if you net out the whole asset, right? Like that's going to be a big part of it is like, how much does it cost to push that flywheel up a little bit?
It's a moat for our business too. You're around long enough and you're doing something good, you're going to see a ton of competitors start flooding into the space, which is great as validation of what we're doing. But that product market fit, product channel fit conundrum is real. It's real. And, I see really great products, beautifully designed products that just can't crack the code on either of those. And then they kind of, wither on the vine, right? Like see it all the time.
No, that was actually my next question, is that in those early days, and you already said when you joined and when y'all launched the apps in 2015, they were crap. So how did you go from this crap app, and what experimentation, what pain, what suffering did it take?
There's some old guard at AllTrails that are gonna listen to this and be like, "Our app's crap. They were great."
But what did it take, and what was the approach to find you had some level of product market fit, but then to actually build a great product around those early signs?
There were a couple of philosophical things that we decided immediately. One was around funding. Do we want to go take funding and try and do this faster? Do we want to do this kind of organically? And my predecessor had done a small seed round. I think he raised $3 million in 2012. And we were still kind of drafting off of that. And then there was a little bit of subscription revenue, and then a whole bunch of just, classic entrepreneur head on a swivel stuff. Like, let's throw a bunch of shit up on the wall. Like, let's see what we can do. So there's, a media play and programmatic ads and whatever, right? Just trying to buy time more than anything, right? Like, keep the servers running for a little bit longer. But we very intentionally decided not to take funding. We wanted to control our own destiny. And part of it, to be clear, part of it was the handshake agreement with the original founder was to grow it and sell it. He wanted us to sell it. And so then if that was kind of the mandate, then it's like, well, why would we even just, deal with the opportunity cost and the headache of going out and trying to raise funds? That's a pain in the ass. So, it was like, let's put our heads down.
Especially for a consumer subscription company in 2015.
Oh my God, right? Yeah.
Ben party to that. It wasn't easy. Let's put it that way.
I tried doing it in 2005, by the way. That was insane. Anyways, but so we decided to put our heads down and just say super scrappy, super lean. And so it just came down to like relentless prioritization. And essentially what we ended up doing was triaging sort of a different funnel metric each quarter, right? So one quarter is like, we got to tackle bounce rate. All right, now we got to tackle sign up rate. Now we got to tackle pro conversion rate. Now we got to tackle retention. And we just kind of spent cycles through 2016 and through 2017, just each quarter, just like laser focus in on that one metric and do what we can and then move. And it worked, because by the end of 2017, we actually achieved profitability, which was cool, which was really, really great.
Yeah.
Like we wanted, again, when you've been around the block long enough, you talk to enough entrepreneurs, you've seen enough. There's so many examples of people going and getting too much funding too soon. And then they develop bad habits, right? Yeah. Is it get a little hot in here? Is it?
What are you talking about? I don't know. Never heard of that.
So, but so you see it, right? Like you get the unsustainable growth channels. Again, the product channel fit question. Like, how are you actually going to bring this to market? And how are you going to do it when that VC money dries up? Like, is this actually...
How are you going to 5X that VC money, right?
Right? Is this sustainable, or are you just connecting yourself to the next round of funding?
You can put yourself in a dead man's corner, right? Where your market's not big enough, whatever, and you end up killing an otherwise like really great business.
Totally. And I'd seen that. I really didn't want to do that here. It felt like, because so much of our growth was coming through SEO, it felt like obviously there was an opportunity, which we later unlocked on the ASO side of things. It felt like even beyond both of those, though, it's just like the word of mouth and PR and viral loops and network effects and
product market fit is a broad thing, right? Like,
yeah.
Growth kind of, if you have a really good product and it serves a niche, like growth just starts to go.
And especially organic growth, right? Like, and that was really the big key. It was like, do we need to be like one of these D2C companies and just raise millions of dollars for Instagram ads, or can we do something that's more sustainable for the long haul? And that was one of the bets. The other big bet that we placed was from a brand positioning perspective. So when I came in, the app was definitely geared towards like the thru hikers and search and rescue and the hardcore, like, backcountry folks. And the challenge with that segment is that there's always these, really esoteric and extreme product requirements that they want, because they're edge cases. They're by definition all edge cases. And in this space in particular, a lot of them are kind of living the van life, trying to live as frugally as possible. And so they don't want to really pay you any money either. It's like, this isn't a good growth segment. We gotta rethink this one. And so I've told this story a lot. The straw man to this day still is my wife. where like she likes going outside with me. She's always down to go on a hike, spend time outside. We have 3 kids, totally trying to raise them on the trail. We have a dog who loves being on the trail. But if I'm not there, she's not going out there, right? So it's like, okay, maybe here's the play. Like, what if we use technology to kind of tear down the barriers for entry, like instill confidence, whether through like product functionality or content, but really make it so that someone like my wife and the hundreds of millions of people around the globe like her who know that they feel better when they time spent in nature, they're just a little scared to do it. Like, can we help augment that? Can we help supplement that? And I think that's going to be the unlock. And that was the big bet. That was the other big bet that we placed in 2015. And,
And just to summarize, I understand it's like to kind of not ignore these like extreme users that are on the edges. You'll serve them, but maybe not in the way that they would want. But like, let's focus on, this larger segment. I mean, I think that's a thing. Even some good advice that's good for founders sometimes doesn't always apply to like B2C stuff sometimes, where it's like, yeah, like listen to your most vocal users. Often there's something there, but like with an ounce of like moderation, because they can lead you in really strange places. And think about the network, think about the like user maybe you're not talking to, or the next, you're saying next 100 million users that you have to get. And that's potentially a much bigger surface area, right? And that doesn't mean you're going to abandon those core users. Like they might grumble a little bit and they might not be totally served by your use case. And like, that's maybe just life. But you've now potentially, like if you think about, the mission of just getting people outdoors, like you've achieved that much better by going for this much larger market segment, right?
Yeah. And they're not mutually exclusive. It's just, which one are we prioritizing? Which one are we preferencing? And how are we, what kind of language are we using? Are we using lingo or not, right? Are we making this accessible for everybody or not? For imagery, right? Are we doing like, Alex Honnold like dangling one-handed off of a cliff,
or just a picture of the end cap at an REI, right? Like,
yeah, or just like a family like smiling and having fun out in nature together. Like, all right, it doesn't cater to the core, but they're not necessarily going to like walk away because they see that stuff either.
Right. I mean, and that comes to channel fit as well, right? Like not your product fit and who your product's oriented for, and that like B2C, you can't divorce the two. Like you can't have totally independent marketing and channels for the product itself, which maybe you could get away with a little bit in B2B. But they don't necessarily have to be like completely like linked. You can kind of serve both niches on the product side, to your point.
Yeah, and speaking of getting more folks out in the mission of AllTrails, I'd love to hear about your freemium strategy, because that's a huge part of it. Like early on, what was your approach, and then how did that evolve over time as far as what features you do give away for free to kind of reach the broadest audience possible, and then what things you paywall to actually get paid?
Yeah.
And I'd like to highlight how, Ron, when we asked you to describe AllTrails, you put free in the name, which I'm sure was very intentional, right? You said it is a free app, right? It is not a premium app. I mean, it is a premium app, but highlight the free. So
yeah,
with that framing, well, tell us about your free app.
This is an ongoing, like not debate, but it's an open question always, and we're constantly like asking our employees and our board, like, let's challenge our assumptions here. Just because we did something a certain way last year doesn't mean we need to do it this way. Like, let's constantly reevaluate this. For us, there's sort of 3 main buckets. We have free unauthenticated users, and then we have free registered users. So kind of that registration wall is like the first key funnel metric. And then there's pro subscribers, right? So we have two kind of core success metrics. One is registration rate and one is pro conversion rate. And then what goes in front and behind of the paywall and the reg wall, the registration wall, is constantly in flux. We actually just did this really fun workshop a couple of weeks ago internally here. It was like the history of AllTrails Pro, and just showing kind of which features started when again in 2015, like what was the pro feature set, how much of those we actually ended up pulling in front of the reg wall, and new features that we put back behind the paywall. So I feel like we're constantly in a state of experimentation here. We've been experimenting with that since day one. We've been experimenting with pricing also on day one. And there's still, I don't feel like we've cracked the code at all. When I first started here, AllTrails Pro was $50 a year. And I spent the first like 2 months just trying to get as much like, obviously all the quant data that I could get my hands on, but as much qualitative data as I could get too. So reading every App Store review, every Reddit thread, every, blog post, just talking to customers, all of it. And aside from everyone telling us that our data sucked and, we got them lost or we got them tickets from the park ranger for telling them to bring a dog when it's not dog friendly, whatever it was. The other piece of feedback that we got was like $50. Like that's way too much. And so we immediately started testing pricing and we tested it at $30 a year and we tested it at $15 a year too. Kind of, all right, if we really just take that price down, is the incremental purchase rate going to offset, the change in net revenue per transaction? They were about a wash, which is really interesting from a net revenue perspective. $15 a year versus $30 a year was basically flat, but we went with 30 because it gave us more maneuverability. We could do more for the folks who were like price sensitive, do discounting, intro offers, whatever. At 15, we really couldn't go any lower. So it's just like, this is it for everybody all the time. But even that we're revisiting now and thinking through like, all right, maybe are there different tiers? We've never done monthly before. So what is a world in which there's a monthly I don't love it. I mean, again, annual is magic. Like why mess with a good thing? But there is a cohort of users, especially outside of the US, where that's a pretty high barrier.
Oh, I mean, I live in the Midwest. Like I only need your app from April to November, right? Like I really don't need to pay all year.
For the 2 weeks in October where you get nice weather. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I think there's the counter argument there of the simplicity. It's like, yeah, sure. But like whatever your value is, this is the price. I've seen that effect before on the price experimentation. You just end up with the same area under the curve, like no matter how you move it. And some apps are like that, some apps are not. But I do think it's really fascinating, the wisdom of crowds, right? And just how like they know, like the masses have priced and valued your product, right? And they're just like showing that like it's very efficient, right? No matter where it goes. Then you can come down to like, some of those. It's almost a good place to be because then, you have that like you can choose where you want it to price. You can basically, you're freed from the like fiduciary duty of like maximum extraction, and you can like just focus on like, okay, what's right for us for some of those goals on company growth and stuff like that. And what's right for the mission, and then like also give yourself some like tactical opportunities in terms of discounting and other stuff like this. And then positioning as well. Like what is it? Like I think that's almost as important as like how do you see AllTrails? Like how do you see it as like what's the value of perception, like a $30 SKU and a 50 and a 15? Those are very different, right? Those are, I think about consumer goods on those scales. That's like each one of those things has like a different like feel to it, right?
Totally. So, and then on top of it though, our business is driven by UGC, right? We have this classic UGC flywheel. And so obviously we know our pro users are more engaged, but a ton of engagement comes from our free users as well. And so you can't kind of turn the screws on them too hard without like really fundamentally damaging the business.
What kind of user-generated content is it? Like pictures and updated and stuff, or what's the
ratings, reviews, photos, recordings. And then there's this virtuous cycle that we have, this beautiful relationship we have with our users, where they help us create as well as curate our trail content. So that's the thing with trail content. Just to go down this rabbit hole for a sec, trail content is super fluid. Like it's not like streets that are relatively static. With trails, you get flooding, you get fires, you get maintenance, you get development, down trees, whatever. Like they're constantly in a state of flux, and it's really, really hard to stay on top of it. We can't do it alone, and so we have.
And it's not like roads where there's like a national database, right, of like uniform data that you can pull from.
Not at all, right? So we do.
Well, there is. It's called AllTrails.
We have this like really beautiful symbiotic relationship with our users, and it's kind of like we both get value from each other, and we're both very transparent about like the relationship. Like you guys help us, and you help the community, right? And we'll package it. We'll keep improving and investing in the product experience and everything else. And again, like this is where it seems to be working. But this is when we're talking about like the choke points in the funnel, that reg wall and the pro conversion wall, this is the thing that's top of mind over all of it.
Yeah, that's great. I did want to move on and talk about in 2018, AllTrails raised $75 million, led by Spectrum Equity. And so I'm curious about that story. So I know, the plan was to sell, and then you've shared on other podcasts that part of that was the founder taking some money, kind of his exit event. But I'm really curious, just from like a company building perspective. I think so many founders and entrepreneurs think, oh, if I can just get more money, if I can just hire more people, everything's going to be easier. But I imagine that's not the full story. So I'd love to hear about the raise, but then also kind of how that changed the company and changed the trajectory.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, right, the handshake agreement was to grow and sell it. So we knew going in exactly what the deal was. And once we hit profitability in 2017, it kind of felt like, all right, next year's probably our year. And we got an inbound from one of the big tech companies early, probably end of Q1 of 2018. And so I was like, all right, game on, right? This is it. We'll go get a bank. We'll run a formal process here. And we started going through it. This was it was fun, right? Like I got to put together sort of like, all right, here's our top 100 strategic partnerships broken out by category, broken out by vertical. Here's like the accretive value. Here's, the investment credit. It was like a really fun thought exercise. And, we're talking to online travel companies and real estate companies and obviously like the retailers and just so many different types of companies out there. And we ran a process and it was fun. But as we were going through it, well, a couple things happened. One is our business really took off. Like it was a breakout trajectory year for us. So that always helps. Anytime you meet with someone, you share your plan, and then you come back a month later and it's like, hey, actually we're outperforming, outpacing. So your price just went up. So that was great. Like a great position to be in. I've never had leverage like that. And the other thing was like, we could walk away at any point if we didn't like it.
Yeah.
I'd done a lot of fundraising before, and that I've never had a position of leverage like that. So that was cool. But as we were going through the process and talking to these different strategic acquirers, the other thing that kept jumping out was like, I don't want to just go be middle management at some big company that I already like have chosen not to work at anyways, because this doesn't align with what I want to do with my time. And so, we're kind of going through is like, is this it? Is this the only path? And we were talking to our bankers about it, and they're like, there's a huge ecosystem of financial investors that are really excited about this consumer subscription space. Let's do a spike there. And so we started talking to some of the different financial firms out there, and that's where it got really, really interesting. I think we all probably have preconceptions about like private equity groups, like
a shudder when you said
I know,
that.
right?
I just the light dimmed here when you said that.
I know, because a lot of the classic ones, they're in your shorts about like your bottom line expenses and micromanaging and telling you to cut costs, and
that's the stereotype, at least.
Totally, right? But there's this whole class of growth equity shops out there, and we sort of plugged into it, and I would squarely put Spectrum Equity in that one. And the first time we talked to them, it was so clear. They're like, you guys aren't thinking big enough. It's like, what? I love that. Okay, like let's talk growth. Like you guys need to be thinking global, right? And it was just like there was so much alignment around this opportunity in front of us. And instead of like pulling the ripcord and just kind of being absorbed and integrated into something else, it's like, how about like we really make a run at this? And so the more we talked to them, the more it's like, yes, hell yes. And it wasn't just from like a funding perspective, because if it was just that, like, again, then you just do an auction and you just see whoever's the highest bidder. But we really wanted, like, I needed a partner. I wanted a value-added partner there. I wanted someone who could bring in, a sense of community, not have to reinvent the wheel all the time. That's always nice when you can plug into a portfolio of similar companies and just pick their brain. All right, like, how did you guys do?
Yeah. I mean, that's an underappreciated aspect of raising versus like going it your own. It's like the network. Like I think VCs oversell it, but maybe founders undervalue it, right? Like
100%.
it does help.
It does. It really does. And so, yeah, we kind of I feel incredibly fortunate that we were able to partner up with Spectrum Equity. And so, David, to your question, it's like, for us, it was this huge unlock. Like, we have another partner. We're going to be more formal with our board structure and, the sort of like metrics, which is great. Like, we needed to level up in our corporate diligence and everything. and they've been a partner, and we've grown the board. We've added more expertise, and again, like the portfolio being sister companies with like Headspace and the Not Worldwide and SurveyMonkey, whatever, like these just cool companies that I respect, and being able to, hit up the CEO and be like, okay, how did you guys deal with this? Because like you said, like there are a ton of challenges that come when you're going through that, the slope of the curve at that point, right? Like the true hyper growth curve, something like, all right, we can't fall back on money as an excuse, like it's purely an execution play. And how do we do more faster? And that's honestly, like, I think one of the coolest things I can say about my board, that the single biggest piece of feedback I get from them, where they're just like yelling at me all the time in a great way. It's like, you got do more faster. Why aren't you doing more faster? Right? Like that is the mantra here, because everyone sees this opportunity. It's ours to go take, right? But we got to execute and do it as fast as we can.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I'll say as somebody recently constructing a board, like that was sort of because as a founder and as a CEO, like you should be at the limits if you're doing your job right? Like you should be kind of feeling, at least like thinking, what your limits are and what the company's limits are. And it's nice, even if there isn't anything more you can do, it's nice to have some people who like ostensibly are aligned with you to be like, are you sure there's not more? Right? Like, is there anything like, are you doing like, could you change this? Like, could you go faster potentially? And sometimes the answer is no, but it does always kind of, you leave those board meetings going like, maybe there is, like maybe there is some way we could do this like better or faster. Right.
Yeah. And then you build a team, right? And that leads back to like the team growth. And this, this is our third year in a row of doubling headcount. Hopefully next year will be our fourth year in a row, and all of the leverage. I'm a big believer, like two things are the lifeblood for companies like ours. One is culture and the other is momentum. And if you lose either of them, you're fucked, right? Like you cannot take your eye off of either of those as a CEO, as a founder, whatever it is. And so like building both, they got to go hand in hand, or you can sacrifice culture as you're doing the internal hyper growth.
You better have an exit strategy, right? Like
exactly.
It's not going to last very long because
you'll never get it back. That's exactly it, right? But generating momentum through like value added hires and raising the bar, bringing in A+. I love being the dumbest person in the room. That's my favorite thing at AllTrails, is walking in there. It's like, all right, I'm going to learn something. Someone's going to teach me something cool, and building a team like that.
So it sounds like the biggest unlock for y'all taking the money was just the ability to hire faster, hire better folks, offer better pay. But was there anything else that you feel like taking funding helped unlock for AllTrails? Were you able to did you start spending more on user acquisition or ramping anything else up?
Kind of ask a clarifying question, and without like you sharing your term sheet or whatever, but like like these deals can be very different than like a venture deal, right? Where like almost always all of it hits the books and it's dilutive, meaning that the company gets the money. But this was like kind of a buyout for the founder as an alternative to a sale. It's like, did you guys structure it so some hit the books and not, or was it all to the founders, or how did, or whatever you're comfortable sharing?
We hardly took any primary capital in 2018. I didn't want it. Like I liked our organic trajectory. I didn't want to, and obviously I've gotten to know Spectrum a lot better. They're not built from the CNA, but you take money from a VC and the expectation is to, like, the success metric is to spend it as hard and aggressive as possible, because they're incentivized to keep you hooked, on the next round. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to, accelerate more like on the product development side of things, but I didn't want to get stuck in a growth model that's dependent on unsustainable paid acquisition, right? So almost the entire deal was secondary capital, which was great.
And for the financially illiterate, i.e. me, like 18 months ago, primary would be the company gets the money. Secondary would be somebody who's already a shareholder gets the money.
Exactly, the people on the cap table. So it was buying out the founder, buying out the original investors, like really cleaning it out. It was a new book altogether at that point, and sort of starting together. I think to the question earlier in terms of like the other value adds, like I really can't stress enough just the strategic value add that I was able to get. Like again, because as a founder or as a CEO or as an exec, you're kind of stuck in your own head a lot, and you can talk to other founders, but there's this like culture, especially in Silicon Valley, like, oh, bro, we're crushing it. Yeah, everyone's crushing it. No one's,
you didn't have to put air quotes around culture there, but like I could hear the air quotes around culture.
And very few people are like really open and transparent about the challenges and what have you. And so being able to go in and have this board that I trust, that I feel like we're all aligned. I've had boards, especially VC backed boards where you get like a different, venture capitalists from every round that you do. Like you have a lot of misaligned incentives. You have a lot of sharp elbows in a room.
I was gonna say there's a lot of, these are all competitors in a lot of cases,
Totally.
right? Hopefully you pick well and you have people that are professionals, but like you can totally end up in a situation where you have frenemies, right?
Yeah, you're watching your back at your own board. That's a horrible way to live. Whereas with this one, it was so clean. It was like, we're owned by Spectrum. This is great. I work on their behalf. This is great. We've got the two of them. There's me. And then, but to their credit, they're like, let's bring on two more operators. And so, they didn't care about like, well, we have to have 51% plus of the seats. It's just like, no, let's just surround ourselves with really awesome people. And so we got the former CEO of Ancestry, who, they know a thing or two about subscription businesses. And then we got the COO of Robinhood. And obviously like they know a thing or two about hyper growth and everything else. And again, like, so it's almost like it's this team, it's like this dream team where just collectively, like they're helping me chart stuff, like see things I wouldn't have been able to see on my own, whatever, the pattern matching.
Yeah.
All of it.
I mean, I think it's a good story in the sense that like, I think we think too terminally sometimes about companies, right? Like it's like they're born, they are grown, and then they get sold and then they die, usually like 9 times out of 10, right? Like it's not often that a sale goes well and the integration goes well. Some spectrum of results, right? But this is a result where I think you guys have a company that's too important to let die, right? Like if you had sold to, I don't know what, your Fangs or whoever was like, I'm sure I could see any number of massive tech company wanting this to be a part of their data set or part of their like social like aspects or whatever. It's just, I could see it plugging into a lot of things. But, to get Google's exciting acquisition today, not saying you guys were talking to Google or not, but as an example, like their exciting acquisition today is tomorrow's like, Happy Trails blog post, right?
Yeah.
That's actually a good name for the shutting down AllTrails acquisition at Google blog post. But and this is a path where, people who are passionate about the mission, the employees and the users, like can kind of get that exit that people are looking for, but without like jeopardizing this thing that's important. And like, maybe this is very hippie, right? But like, I think there is some aspect of companies that's beyond like the capital value and beyond like even like the culture, but like actually achieving the mission and making that change in the world or providing that service that's more important than, hyper growth or whatever. And look, I mean, we should get into talking about now, like post round, but it sounds like you guys are in hyper growth anyway, right? So it's not like it's this false dichotomy of, right? Like either you're like raising from venture and you're like going at it really hard, or like you're a lifestyle business or, whatever. And it's just like such a, maybe us like lampooning this straw man of a false narrative has like most of the talking about those two, like make that is the totality of the false dichotomy is us talking about it. But I really think this is a great example of like one of those like interesting, outcomes and stories. So yeah, tell us about what's happening now.
I appreciate you sharing that specifically, because even in researching it, I listened to a couple of your other interviews. I still assumed that there was a pretty big primary chunk that went into the balance sheet of the company and then accelerated it from there. So it's an even more interesting story to me that raise was mostly secondary. So from the $3 million seed way back in whatever it was, 2012, 2013, it really has been a almost bootstrapped company and becoming what it is today on such little capital is really incredible and really kind of speaks to consumer subscription space and how you can operate and go big without spending a ton of money if you do it right. If you don't just plug into Instagram and blow $5 million of VC money acquiring the wrong users, if you actually talk to them and build a good product and everything else. But I did want to jump in go ahead.
I was just saying on top of not only that, at the first board meeting that we had with Spectrum, I walked in and I said, hey, this is great. High five, super stoked. We're also, I think we should donate 1% of our revenue to environmental causes. I know you guys just shelled out a whole lot of money, but would that be okay? And to their credit, they're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And one of the first things we did post-transaction was signing up for 1% for the planet. Like there's totally a different path here. I didn't realize it. And I think it's cool for people. I don't know. I wish I heard this earlier in my career. Like there are, like you said, like it's not a dichotomy. Like there's so many different ways to do this. I think we end up fetishizing almost, or like putting on a pedestal this whole like massive VC round kind of stuff, and there's a time and a place for it for sure. But like, that's not the success metric in and of itself. Like more often than not, especially for earlier companies, it's the death knell. And so I think that I'm always, I get hit up by people, for whatever, all the time talking about this kind of stuff. And so I was like, dude, if you can bootstrap it, if you can control your own destiny, like do it, find right partners that are going to unlock growth and everything else. But like, don't fall victim to that, like just that story that you think is like the classic Silicon Valley startup story, which is you go out, you raise a big round and you have an IPO. It never works. It never works that way.
Who would do that?
Too many, man.
Before we run out of time, I do want to know, so you're talking about like doubling. And so I'm guessing like the pandemic, like we've seen across the ecosystem has been really, especially I can imagine there's two aspects to it, right? Like one, your digital service. And then secondly, like you're very good, compatible with like social distancing. So did you like think you would be having this conversation, 4 years after the Spectrum deal, like doubling every headcount every year? Because that's typically not what private equity company growth rates look like.
I know. No, it was, so I'll preface this by saying we were incredibly fortunate during COVID. And sometimes you just get lucky. There's a ton of great companies out there that just like had to pull sales reps out of the field or weren't equipped for like the supply chain issues or whatever it was, right? Like we like you said, we're a digital first company. We had a somewhat distributed workforce. So we're already like using Zoom and Slack and going fully remote. Like we saw no drop in productivity. Now, granted, like when the world shut down mid-March, that was a little bit scary. But we knew it would be temporary. How long, no one really knew. But by mid-April, we were going to our board and we're saying like, look, like I know things look a little bleak right now. Like the machine has fully ground to a halt, but we think actually like this is going to be an insane accelerant once things open back up. There's nothing to do. Like you said, it lends itself perfectly to social distancing. People who can't travel anymore, like, all right, we're going to explore our local state parks. Like we'll scratch that itch that way. I got 3 kids and, school is canceled and obviously, summer camps are getting, it's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with these kids? And it's like, we're going to run them ragged on the trail. Every weekend, just going on the trail and we're running them ragged. There's
a good ad campaign in there. Just like
totally, right?
And so sleeping kids in the back of a Subaru Forester and it's like, run them out on the trail.
Exactly. So, that, we did make a big strategic decision to get in front of it and start hiring like crazy and just make a play. And again, like, sometimes you get lucky. That worked. All these companies around us that we were never able to like really poach from or whatever, suddenly like we're able to go grab their talent, like not just from people who are like, but people who are actively working there who are just like, I don't want to do this with my life anymore. I like spending time outside. The number of inbound applicants that like write in their cover letter, I was looking at which apps I use the most and I just started applying to those jobs. I think that there really is this like really great, and I applaud it and I love it and I hope it never stops. People like taking more agency and control over their career and not just like reactively, just doing whatever life throws you.
The geographic unlock of remote, I think, is a big part of that, right? 'Cause suddenly like you can just literally go on your phone and probably today 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to work for that company depending on your like locale or like time zone.
Totally.
But it wasn't that way 2 years ago, right?
Not at all. Exactly. So a lot has changed in this time. And so, with all of that, with the big accelerant they were seeing on the usability side through 2020, there's I think David, you had asked this like pre-show, there's 2 big questions hanging over our business as we went into 2021. One is, are the registered users who we got last year during COVID, are they going to convert to pro? Like our conversion to pro happens over time. We look at a lot of stuff through a cohorted basis. And it just like, it goes up and to the right. It'll take years for some users to cross the line to pro, but it's great. It just keeps going up. So are the folks who signed up when there was nothing else to do, are they ever going to convert to pro or not? And then the other big question is, all the folks who converted to pro in the height of the pandemic in 2020, once the world opens up, like, are they going to retain, or are we going to have this huge, the bottom drop out from under us? And so these were 2 questions kind of like hanging over our heads as we headed into we have a seasonal business. It follows the sun pretty much. So as we headed into like May, June, July of this year, thankfully, the answer for both was a resounding yes. The folks who signed up last year are converting at a higher rate than normal. And then the folks who subscribed are retaining at higher rates than normal too. And I think it's kind of more of a testament to like how the like zeitgeist has changed a little bit post-pandemic. And again, people are like, being outside just makes people feel good. Like it's that simple. It's not very complicated. You feel better when you spend time outside, and people are just incorporating it into their regular routines now. Yeah,
it's interesting how often with, for positives and negatives, like sometimes I think you came up 3 cherries, right? You got like for COVID, like it just really lined up, and then it's continued because you say like a lot of, you're talking about the hiring thing too, like a lot of habits changed during COVID, and I don't think anything will necessarily go back, right? Especially if people have found a new happier maximum, right? For their lives. And if, you guys are part of that, that's great. And that seems like, I don't know, we don't have total good quantitative data on this, but it doesn't seem like the whole boost from last year totally collapsed this year. Like it seems like it just was like an accelerant. I think there's other industries would sort of back that up.
Yep. Well, we're coming up on time. Is there anything else I should have asked you?
No, this was fun, guys.
I guess you guys are probably hiring, right?
We're hiring like crazy right now. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you use AllTrails, there you go.
Any particular roles you want to shout out?
I mean, we're always starving for great engineering talent. Android, iOS, front end, back end, DevOps, security, all of it. PMs, product designers, mapping designers, customer support, the full gamut. The entire every department is hiring right now.
Well, it sounds like a really fun company to work for. We'll put links to your job page and to your personal LinkedIn and a few other places in the show notes. But this is really fun chatting with you today, Ron. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.